Welcome to part 3 of my Crossing Newfoundland by ATV 2022 video series. In part 2, you saw day 4 and 5 of our 10-day ATV and side-by-side trip to Newfoundland, Canada, where we drove from Clarenville to Gander and then Gander to Badger. In today's video, you'll see us travel from Badger to Deer Lake and then Deer Lake to Corner Brook. I first did this trip in 2003 with my father-in-law and my brother-in-law. We didn't know how we were going to do it, but we went anyways and we figured it out. We had a fantastic time. I was hooked, and I've been going back pretty much ever since. I decided to share everything I learned about how to do this trip online so other people could do it as well. I always tell people it's just too good of a trip not to share with others. I made a website and I came up with a name for it called Crossing Newfoundland by ATV. I also started to document our trip with videos on my EastCoastATV YouTube channel, and now I have a Facebook page dedicated to updating people about the trip. At first, I didn't think many people would be interested. I was wrong. My website has over 500,000 hits and I've had tens of thousands of views on YouTube. Thousands of people across Canada and the United States have done this trip. I'm happy to say many of them have reached out to me to tell me they did it solely because of my website and my videos encouraged them to do it. I enjoy looking at other people's photos on social media of their Newfoundland trips. I've even seen some videos that other people posted on YouTube of their trips, and I always enjoy watching those as well. I just ask that you come up with a name other than Crossing Newfoundland by ATV, please. That one's already taken. If you're new to my channel, my friends and I do this trip every year because it's the ATV trip of a lifetime, and fortunately for us, we live close enough to do it. Let's get into day 6, Badger to Deer Lake. We had a great night of playing cards, we had a lot of laughs, everyone had a good sleep. We got up the next morning, we tidied up, we packed up all of our gear, and we were ready to hit the trail. But not before we had an awesome breakfast that Howley made for us with scrambled eggs and bacon and sausage and lots of coffee. That kept us going all morning until we get to the Gaff Topsail. One of the things that you may notice if you're doing this trip is that between Badger and Deer Lake, the terrain is quite different than the previous few days that it took us to get here. It's surprisingly flat. The alders are growing up quite high, just like in other sections around the island, but there's really nothing you can do to stop that. When the alders break, there's some beautiful scenery. It's flatlands, boulders everywhere, these big lakes and ponds. It's really quite unique. And about 5 kilometers before you get to the Gaff Topsail is an old granite quarry, which is always worth stopping in there to take a few pictures. The wind and rain was not giving us much of a break, but at least it wasn't very cold out. Since we were here, we decided we might as well drive up towards the top and angle our machines down towards the bottom so we could get some nice pictures. I know you've seen a lot of wind and rain in this series of videos the last few days, but generally the weather in Newfoundland in September is fantastic, with bright blue skies and very comfortable temperatures over 20 degrees Celsius, which is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Unfortunately for us, there were 2 hurricanes swirling around the province when we were there. That usually doesn't happen. This trail that we're on here is about 1 kilometer long, and it takes you from the rail bed below to the Gaff Topsail up top. It's rocky and rough in a few places, but I mean, just take your time and it's really not that difficult to get through it. If you're a beginner or you're not used to riding on steep trails with loose rock, then this trail might not be for you. You'll have to decide that for yourself when you get there. That's the top up in the background you can see there. And once you do get to the top, there's a concrete platform where you can park your machines. There used to be an old radio tower here back in World War II. If you want, you can climb up to the top on foot. Just be careful, especially if it's raining, the rocks can be a little slippery. The next best thing to seeing this in person is when you're with somebody else who hasn't seen it yet and this is their first time.
This is incredible, man.
One time when we were up at the top of the Gaff, you could see a couple of moose way off in the background running through a huge field. I think they were even a few kilometers away, but because it was such a good view from up there, we could still see them. If you go across Newfoundland on your ATVs, make sure you stop at the Gaff Topsail. After we leave the Gaff Topsail, our next big stop is Howley, where we like to drive around the sand for a bit. Some years we even camp there on the beaches. It's beautiful. But today we're not going to camp there, but we are going to stop there on our way through to Deer Lake. This is the Howley area here, you can see now on the map, and that's the route we took this year. When we made it to Howley in the beach area here, we were looking forward to driving a few miles up the beach, because sometimes you can go up a long way and turn around and come back, but this year the water was much higher than normal, so as you can see here, we didn't make it very far at all in this section, and then we had to turn around. A nice sandy area like this, it's almost irresistible to go do a little spin out. Wind got me pretty good. Earlier in the day, before we got to this beach, I was telling some of the other guys about how on the year before we ran into these guys that were traveling across the island like we were, and one of them rolled their machine over playing around in the sand. And their wind almost did the exact same thing, so the guys thought it was pretty funny.
That was close.
Here's a replay from the 2021 trip where they rolled over their machine. These guys were from Quebec and Ontario doing a trip around Eastern Canada, and they were a great group of fellas.
Oh!
The driver was fine, and so was his machine, and we helped him put it back up on all four wheels. We got back on the rail bed, went up the road a short distance, and decided to check out the other side of the beach. It's been so gray in these videos lately because of all the bad weather. I decided to show you a drone shot from a few years ago when we were here, and it was bright blue skies and much nicer. You can also camp at this beach. Keep that in mind. If you want to do this trip and you want to do it hotels, that's fine, or you can do a mix of camping and hotels. This beach is a beautiful place to stay at if you're going to pitch a tent. Our next stop was the main dam just outside of Deer Lake. This thing, they started building it in 1922 and it was finished in 1925, so basically it's 100 years old. After we left the dam, we kept heading westbound towards Deer Lake. And earlier in the day, when we were at the Granite Quarry, there was a big puddle in there, and Howie drove through the water, and there was a rock in the water he didn't see, and it bent the suspension arm in the back of his machine pretty bad. So on our way there, he was looking up on the internet. He found a welder that would fix that, and Howie had to take the part off himself, which he did, gave it to the guy. The guy takes it back to his shop, he straightens it out, he puts a tube over top of it and welds it on there. It's probably stronger now than it was originally, and puts it back on the machine. We were very impressed with the amount of service that we got from that fella.
How'd you make it to the beach? Oh, man.
We drove over 137 kilometers today between Badger and Deer Lake, with stops at the Granite Quarry, the Gaff Topsail, Howley Beach, the main dam, and then finally the Deer Lake Hotel for the night. The restaurant there is really good. The food was good, and the service was also fantastic. Our waitress was really funny. Deer Lake to Corner Brook. This day of the trip was an especially scenic one. We traveled over 160 kilometers, or 100 miles. Years ago, you used to have to get towed between Pasadena, which is about 20 kilometers west of Deer Lake, to get to the city of Corner Brook. But since you're legally allowed to ride ATVs there now, you can take a scenic route through the mountains to get there instead. There's a few different routes you can take depending on what you want to see. The most direct route is only about 60 kilometers or about 35 miles. Luckily for us, we were in no rush, so we packed in an extra 100 kilometers or an extra 60 miles of scenery, which you'll get to see shortly. After leaving the Deer Lake Hotel, we went north to the awesome Lomond Sinkhole. Then back south to Cloudy Pond, Old Man's Pond, Goose Arm, a beautiful waterfall, Cox's Cove, before heading to the Greenwood Inn Suites in Corner Brook for the night. Once you leave the Deer Lake Hotel, you have to cross the street. go over to the Irving gas station and follow a trail through the woods to get you down to the town of Deer Lake. You're legally allowed to drive ATVs and side-by-sides on several roads in the town of Deer Lake, which is fantastic. In our case, we drove through Commerce Street, Nicholsville Road, over towards George Aaron Drive, then over to Goose Arm Drive. That total distance is about 5 kilometers. Then you're back into these mountain trails, which are fantastic. They take you all the way up to Lomond Lodge if you want to go that far. We've been doing this trip long before it was legal to drive ATVs and side-by-sides on many roads in Newfoundland. And I must say, this just makes it so much easier to do this trip. And lots of people are doing this trip now, and this is one of the reasons. Because of the ease of being able to do this, they're seeing more and more ATV tourists coming to Newfoundland. ATVers can easily access gas stations, hotels, and other amenities now. And for those of you that are wondering about the gap between Deer Lake and Corner Brook, this route that we're taking now is the route that you take to get around that, whereas you used to have to get towed before. And we weren't on the trail very long before the sun decided to make an appearance, which was great because this is a very scenic day. Years ago when we did this trip previously, we used to take this road around Bottomless Pond. We can't do that anymore because for some reason that pond is flooded and it's about 20 feet higher than it ever used to be. And now this one that's outlined on the GPS is the road we take. It's fine to get around. It's a little muddy, as you'll see in a minute. And it's a shame, if you look here into the pond, you can see the roof of someone's building in the water. That's someone's cottage. And there's a few over on the other side as well. And those things have broken free and they just kind of float around the pond now, unfortunately. This was the trail I mentioned earlier that I said was a little muddy, and as you can see, it's not really that bad at all. A little bumpy here and there, but I mean, you're not going to get stuck in this type of mud. Once you come to the other end of that trail, you come out to a gorgeous pond here, and I looked it up on the map and I can't find the name of it. It was such a nice day, and the temperature was warm. Grant couldn't help himself. He wanted to go out in that pond for a swim.
What a spot. It's cold out here. Yeah, a nice little spot. Look how clear it is. I bet you there's fish there. Look, one jumped over there. Oh, Jesus, break my neck. My helmet, buddy. How nice that is. That's one way to do it. That's good on the camera. How cold is it, Grant?
I think it was a little cold, but I also think that everybody else regretted not going in the water as well. At this point in the day, we made really good time, so we were in no rush. We stuck around for a few minutes before heading up to the Lomond Sinkhole. After we left the pond, Grant and I switched machines, and it was a dusty day because it was getting nice and it dried up quickly, as you can see from these pictures. These new Commanders are really nice. I was really impressed with how smooth the clutching is in it compared to my machine. And this section of road, I was surprised at how rough it was actually, but it turns out it was just because of air pressure. Grant had way too much air pressure in his tires. After he got out of my machine, the first thing he did was come to his machine and air them down. Once we got to the Lomond Sinkhole, people were trying to decide if they wanted to go down to the bottom or not. It's really steep down there, so you have to hold on to a rope as you're going down. And sometimes it can be damp. This day it was dry, luckily for us. Look at the difference in the amount of water coming down here from last year versus this year.
Come down there every morning for a shower.
After we climbed back out of the sinkhole, we got up top and the other fellas were having a snack, and they were also feeding some of the friendly birds.
He was. Yeah. He almost got you.
After we left the Lomond Sinkhole, we were heading towards Cloudy Pond, and some of the roads in here are in fantastic shape, and honestly, some of the riding in here is my favorite on the entire island. Now there is one section towards Cloudy Pond that's a little rough. It's not that long, it's a few kilometers maybe at the most. It's worth the ride in for sure. We arrived at Cloudy Pond right around lunchtime, so Buffalo Bill set up his barbecue and everybody else took turns washing some of the mud off their machines. Cloudy Pond is a very scenic spot, and it's well worth the trip in to see it. I love stopping in here, even if it's only for a short time to take a few pictures when we're on our way to someplace else. If you're doing this trip and you're planning on stopping in to see it, make sure you give yourself at least an hour or so you can really take it in and enjoy it. And please make sure you don't leave anything behind so we keep places like this pristine. We spent about an hour and a half there before continuing on towards our next stop at Old Man's Pond. A few kilometers west of us is a river crossing. It had been pretty dry on this area of the west coast, so the river wasn't very deep. If you go straight across though, there is a deep section, so to avoid that, make sure you go wide.
Oh my God. Howie was up to his seat for a sec.
This is Howie and Bill doing it in 2018. It can be done, you're risking getting wet though. Not long after the river crossing, you're on great roads like this. One of the downsides, though, is that they get dry and dusty. So, bring a dust mask, bring a dust mask. We've been coming to Cloudy Pond for years. It's so close off the main trail that there's no point in going by it. And I've noticed lately there's a lot of trailers parked very close to this spot. Can you imagine being able to wake up in the summer and come down here first thing in the morning? Our next stop was Goose Arm, which is only about 5 kilometers or 3 miles from Old Man's Pond. Not long to get there at all, so we decided to stop in and take some pictures. This is a really nice little community. There's a lot of cottages down here right on the water. I would almost be afraid of what would happen when the hurricanes come through here.
That was right over there, one of those spots over there that you... over the bank.
I say the tide's coming maxing out now, so I think it's still at times it comes in here.
I think it's higher than normal because of the hurricane going by.
Oh, maybe you're right.
Gotta be. Never seen it like that. It must be all family.
As Bill mentioned before, the water is higher than we've ever seen it here before. It's right up to the cottages. Normally we ride down the beach to a different trail that we take out of there, but we couldn't that day because the water was covering the beach completely, and it's salt water, so we didn't want to have to drive through that. If you look at this drone video I took from 2018, you can see how much higher the water is. We were on our way to the next stop, which was the waterfall just outside of Cox's Cove, but not before eating some more trail dust. When we get to the waterfall, it was really warm. It was probably 25 or 26 degrees Celsius, which is about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and Evan decided to go for a swim, and I think Grant might have too. I decided to go walk up around the top to take a look down. This is Cox's Cove. It's only a few minutes up the road from the waterfall that we were just at. This is a small town. It's got about 600, 700 people, I think, and as you can see, the main industry here is fishing. If you drive all the way to the end of the road where we are here, you're up high on a bit of a peak, and it's a great spot to take some pictures. While we were here, a local business owner came by to speak to us. His name is Darren Park, and he owns a business called Four Seasons Tours. He does things like cod fishing boat tours and sightseeing tours where they find whales and dolphins and bald eagles, things like that. In the winter, they do snowmobile tours up to the Lomond Sinkhole and other places. I think the sinkhole would be pretty incredible to see when it's frozen. If you want to do a trip like this and you want to plan it for your friends and your family, make sure you check out my online resources. Everything you need to know is there. My Crossing Newfoundland by ATV.com website, my Crossing Newfoundland by ATV Facebook page, and my East Coast ATV YouTube channel. I've got tons of videos on there of Newfoundland from other years on all kinds of different trips we've taken, and I explain our day's trip in each of those videos. We are on our way to the city of Corner Brook, where we will spend the night at the Greenwood Inn Suites, which is about 45 kilometers away. You can see the excellent condition of the trails and roads that we're on, and they're like that all the way to Hughes Brooks, which is only 5 kilometers away from Corner Brook. You can drive at a decent steady pace the entire way. Once you get to Hughes Brooks, you have to ride the shoulder of the highway all the way into Corner Brook, which is about 5 kilometers. The speed limits vary between 50 kilometers an hour and 80 kilometers an hour, which is 30 and 50 miles per hour. Once you cross this bridge, you're officially in Corner Brook, and all the roads you take from here down to the downtown core, they're all 100% legal for ATVs and side-by-sides to be driving on them. It feels odd when you're driving with cars on the road here. I live in Nova Scotia and this isn't allowed. Not yet anyway. One of the benefits of staying at the Greenwood Inn Suites is the underground parking. All of our machines fit in the garage, no problem. Even Bill's with his cargo box on the roof. We drove approximately 165 kilometers or 100 miles over about 9.5 hours. We all found a place to park, and then we grabbed our gear and went up towards our rooms. And it was funny watching some of the guys carry their gear. They were taking so much at once.
What do you this there, skipper?
Underground parking.
I promise to show you a good time. I cleared my 2 inches.
Then we all met at the pub, which is attached to the hotel, called the Crown and Moose, for supper. Thanks so much for watching. As always, if you like what you saw, please consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the like button below this video. Here's a few things that you're going to see in the 4th and final video.